Last week, we showed you guys our full tour of our 2021 Ford Transit, and I asked you to take a guess in the comments as to how much it cost. Well, this week we're gonna go through step by step everything that we put into the Ford Transit and how much it cost. So let's get a few things out of the way first before you guys make some comments on how much this build cost. It was indeed quite expensive. Some of the things that we did in this van were not really necessary, or we did them for testing purposes and ultimately decided that they weren't worth it. So as I go through this, I'm gonna outline some cheaper alternatives and things that we might try in the future or things that we did in the past when we built our Sprinter van. Let's jump into the numbers. The first thing that we did to this camper van was some sound control. We used lizard skin sound control and ceramic insulation. This cost a total of $2,515.62. Now, looking back at it, I don't think that it actually gave us as much benefit as it did cost. And I don't think that we would do it again. It was a pain in the butt to apply. It was a mess. And really, I'm still trying to scrub lizard skin off of my desk now over a year later. So I don't think I would recommend this going forward. A cheaper alternative to lizard skin would be something like Fat Mat Rattle Trap Sound Deadening. We use that in our Sprinter van and it costs about $150. An even cheaper alternative would be to simply not use any sound deadening. By the time you get your insulation, your walls, your cabinets, your bed, all of that into your van, you're gonna have quite a bit of sound deadening in your van. And ultimately, the things that are going to be more noisy than the van itself are going to be things like your silverware rattling around in your drawer, or the cup that you forgot to put away that's still in the sink. You're driving down the road and you realize that all of this stuff is rattling around. So that would cost you $0. The next thing that we added into our camper van was some additional windows so that we could get some additional light, some additional airflow, and that was something that we didn't have in our Sprinter, and we really wanted that in this camper van, to have some additional light options, some ability to just look outside and not feel like we're in a cave in the van. And since we live in the mountains of Colorado and we are often in cold environments, we decided to go with the Tern Overland Arctic Tern windows, since they're double paned and really good for a 4-season camper. We spent a total of $2,305.86 on the windows and the installation. There are some less expensive alternatives to the Arctic Tern windows. If you're not necessarily camping in cold weather and you don't need that double paned windows, then you could go with something a little bit less expensive, like the half slider windows that you can just get off of Amazon. Those are about $400 per window. And again, an even less alternative would be to just simply not add additional windows at all. Now, the next thing that we had to install was the Satsang VanWorks custom window jambs, which cost us $1,311. These are specifically designed to work with the Tern Overland windows that we purchased, because the Tern Overland windows are designed to be installed directly against the metal and don't really account for any additional insulation that will be usually installed in a camper van. So Satsang VanWorks has created the perfect solution for this in their custom window jambs, and we purchased those to make that a lot simpler. So if you're looking for a cheaper alternative to those custom window jambs, one way you could save some money is to just make them yourself out of plywood. You could use the window itself as the template and cut it out yourself. It would just cost the cost of the plywood. If you are good at woodworking, I would highly recommend that. That's a fantastic way to do that. For us, it was way simpler to just buy the pre-made ones. And again, if you are not using a window that requires any kind of additional window jamb, or if you opted for no windows, that would be at no cost. Next, we added some branch circuit wiring, and for those branch circuits, we used our own explorist.life branch circuit wiring kits to wire our USB outlets, our 12-volt outlets, and our 120-volt outlets. And in this van, we used 3 of the 20-foot USB/12-volt outlet wiring kits, 6 12-volt outlets, and 6 USB outlets. And that came to a total of $269.95. And this one is kind of hard to give a cheaper alternative, because we've actually designed our kits specifically so that you're not wasting any money on buying big packs of lever nuts or extra wire or things like that. So we hope that we have actually made the cheapest alternative. One way you could save money, though, is just to use less of the wiring kits and less outlets. If, for example, we had just used one kit of USB and 12-volt outlets and one puck light wiring kit with 3 12-volt outlets, then we would have saved quite a bit of money and probably spent around $64. For lighting, we used puck lights on the ceiling and then some LED strip lighting under the cabinets for indirect lighting. For this, we spent a total of $108.99. And I don't really have any cheaper alternatives here because there are just so many alternatives to lights and so many different types and brands that you can choose from on Amazon or wherever you want to buy your lights. And the quantity really is probably going to be where you're going to save money there. We also put various outlets around the van, both 12 volt and 120 volt for easy access. We added some sleek switches to the control panel for all of our lights, and we added a dimmer switch for the overhead lighting. And that cost us a total of $369.97. And again, it is a little bit difficult to pin down some cheaper alternatives, but there are a plethora of different items that you can choose from on Amazon or wherever you want to shop and get some less expensive switches, dimmers, and things like that. So there was no so. Something that we added to this camper van that we did not have in our previous Sprinter van was an air conditioner. We added a pneumatic 24-volt air conditioner for $4,989. And I'm super excited about this. This has been fantastic as we've used the van for events around Colorado during the summer. Our team has really loved the option of having an air conditioner while we're at these expos and trade shows and while we're just camping in warm weather. A cheaper alternative to the air conditioner that we purchased would be the previous model, which was the pneumatic 24-volt X3 air conditioner, which was about $3,200. Or if you want to save even more, just omitting an air conditioner altogether would save you that $5,000. And when it's not quite hot enough to need the air conditioner, but we still wanted some airflow, we added a Maxxair Fan for $543.29. Now, we opted for both the air conditioner and the Maxxair Fan so that we could have the option of running just the fan when we didn't need the full air conditioner. But so far, we haven't actually used the Maxxair Fan too much because the pneumatic air conditioner does have a fan mode as well. So really, in hindsight, I think this was a little bit redundant. And so if you want to save some money and you are adding that air conditioner, I would recommend just omitting that roof fan entirely. Another way to save money if you are looking to add an RV roof fan is to just search on Amazon. They have a wide variety of less expensive options than a Maxxair Fan. And although I can't speak towards the quality of them, there are several options with pretty good reviews, and they range from $60 to $150. For our roof rack, we actually worked directly with Unaka Gear Co. to design this low-profile roof rack that has crossbars exactly where we needed them for mounting our custom 55-watt and 35-watt rich solar panels around our air conditioner and Maxxair Fan. We spent $1,695 on this roof rack. Now, adding cheaper alternatives to a roof rack is going to be very difficult because there are so many options out there, but I'll just give you a few different options here. Unaka Gear Co. does have a wide variety of roof racks from $595 all the way up to $1,950, so I would recommend checking them out. Additionally, a lot of people will make their own roof racks out of 80/20 extrusion, which costs about $400 or $500. Now, if you're working from the road like we do, you know that having cell signal is really, really important. So adding a weBoost was super important to us, and we spent $550.33 on that. Some cheaper alternatives for cell signal boosters. Again, searching on Amazon, they actually have several that have pretty decent reviews that are around $200. Or if you're not relying on cell signal and you're not working from home, then simply not adding one would be a great way to save money. Finding a good flooring for this camper van was super important to me because in our Sprinter, we put down bamboo flooring, which was supposed to be really durable and stand up to all of the abuse, but unfortunately it did not. It was terrible and it was destroyed within probably a few months of us living in the Sprinter van. So when we went to research our flooring for this van, we decided that we needed to test a few different types of flooring and figure out what would stand up to all of the abuse, what would be easiest to clean, and hopefully we would get something a lot better. So we were willing to spend a little bit more this time around so that we had something that lasted. We ended up going with Chili Chilliwack tweed flooring, and it has so far been really, really nice. This cost us a total of $2,450.40 for both the flooring and the subfloor, which we used our sheathing. Some ways to save some money on van flooring would be first to opt out of the L-track. L-track is pretty expensive, and we did put quite a bit of it on the floor, so that added a lot of cost. Another way to save some money would be to opt for some less expensive floor covering. Our main insulation throughout the entire van was Thinsulate insulation. We went with Thinsulate to get a really good coverage throughout the entire van and kind of be able to stuff it into every nook and cranny that we possibly could. We ended up spending about $820 on this. For a cheaper alternative, in our first van, we actually used rigid foam insulation for the large areas and expanding foam for the smaller areas, and it actually worked really well for our purposes, but there were definitely some cold spots in the van. We spent about $500 on this in our first van. I did an entire video covering the cost of our walls, which I will link to right here. Our walls are birch plywood with black L-track framing secured to the walls of the van with plus nuts. We spent a total of $4,484.58 on the walls, which is different than the number that I came up with in the full walls costing video because I omitted on this one the cost of the window jambs, which we talked about previously. Some ways to save money on your walls would be to opt out of the L-track, specifically the black L-track, because that is excessively expensive. That would have saved us a bunch of money here. We added swivel seats to the driver and passenger seats, and that cost us $699.98. And I don't have any cheaper alternatives for swivel seats aside from just simply opting out of those. And of course, our electrical system was going to be pretty expensive because that is the bread and butter of what we do here on Explorist Life. We spent $12,060 on our electrical system, and I also did a full video breaking down the cost of that, and we'll link to that right here. And again, since we have a ton of cheaper alternatives here at Explorist Life for electrical systems, I'm just gonna keep it simple and note that there are several different packages on our website and on our shop that are a lot less expensive than the one that we put in this van. For our plumbing system, we installed a 20-gallon wheel well water tank from Titan Vans, as well as a water heater, a water pump to deliver that water to the sink, and an outdoor shower. And we spent $1,911.48. In our Sprinter van, we had a much less sophisticated plumbing setup, which included a water pump, 2 portable water containers, an aquatainer, and some various plumbing parts, and we spent about $170. And in this camper van, we added a composting toilet just as we have in the past, and we spent $780 on that. And I'm gonna skip alternatives to toilets because, you do you. I don't have any opinions. I love my composting toilet, and that's all I'm worried about. For our cabinets, we essentially have 4 modules in the camper van, all mounted to the walls and floors with L-track mounts. We spent a total of $2,518.49 on the cabinets. And again, there are so many different ways that you can possibly do cabinets and save money here. It's just not feasible for me to break down every single way that you could possibly save money. But a few simple ways would be to use less expensive wood. We used birch, make fewer cabinets, and use fewer drawers because drawer slides are excessively expensive. For our kitchen cabinet, we also added an induction cooktop, a sink, a fridge, a gray water tank, and a wireless tank sensor to monitor the tank levels. In total for our kitchen, we spent $2,691.41. Some cheaper alternatives for the kitchen would be to omit the induction cooktop, use a less expensive fridge. And actually in our Sprinter, we did use a chest style fridge, which was a little bit less expensive than the one that we have now. We also used an alcohol burning stove, which apparently is no longer sold. I couldn't find it anymore, but similar products out there would be propane burning stoves and a smaller sink, and that all saved us a bunch of money. We opted for a pretty simple bed platform in this build using unistrut for the framing, square tubing for the headboard frame, and birch for the headboard itself. We also went with a mattress from Tachta that was just a typical full-size mattress, and in total on our bed we spent $1,705.71. And again, I had a hard time coming up with cheaper alternatives for a bed because this was a pretty simple build, but one way to save some money would be to just omit the headboard and save on that square tubing and the wood. We installed 2 different bug wall bug screens on this van and spent $948 on those. Some cheaper alternatives to the bug wall bug screens would be to omit bug screens altogether or to make them yourself, which I wouldn't recommend unless you are really, really good at sewing and specifically sewing netting. I hate even recommending sewing them yourself because in our Sprinter van, we had Nate's mom sew our bug screens for us, and she was not very happy. And she's actually good at sewing. So if you want to save some money and also cuss a lot, go ahead and try that yourself. We also spent $138.13 on various tank sensors and temperature sensors throughout the van to monitor when our gray water tank is almost full, when our freshwater tank is almost empty, and also just the ambient temperature in the van so that we can set up alerts on our phone. I really, really love this, and for just $138, it was very much worth it. We also added a 2-inch lift to our camper van, and we spent $3,975.48, which included the lift kit as well as the alignment after doing the lift. Now, I'm not going to recommend any cheaper alternatives because I do not think that suspension is a place to cheap out. So if you're going to want to save the money there, just simply don't put a lift on your vehicle. After we installed the lift, we also added new wheels and tires that were a little bit bigger and beefier than the stock tires. We spent $2,419.86 on the wheels and tires. For some cheaper alternatives, and again, there are a ton of different options out there, so I'm going to recommend taking a look at Van Parts Warehouse, and they have various wheels that will fit onto the Transit van, the Sprinter van, and a ProMaster van. On the front of the van, we installed a flatline Vanco nudge bar so that we could attach all of our auxiliary lights as well as provide a little bit of extra protection for the front of the van. We spent $895 on the nudge bar. Now, a cheaper alternative for this nudge bar would simply be to omit it. A nudge bar is a relatively inexpensive item in terms of other bumper options or brush guard options out there, and so I think if you're going to go any less expensive than just a nudge bar, you're probably just going to omit it altogether. We added a ton of different lights to the exterior of our van, and living in the mountains of Colorado, we really needed to be able to see well in the snow, rain, fog, and be able to light up ditches for deer, elk, bears, and other wildlife on the road. So we spent $2,458.40 on lighting, which is really excessive, but again, I think it's well worth it for protecting us in these mountains. And for cheaper alternatives to exterior lighting, there are a ton of different options for exterior lighting. And also, you may not need the 16 or so different lights that we added to our camper van. So check out your different options. Again, Van Parts Warehouse has a ton of different options for different lights. You can also find some on Amazon and kind of figure out what all will suit your needs. And to control all of that lighting that we installed, we spent $415.59 on the Garmin Power Switch, which allows us to control all of the lights from the touchscreen in the Transit, as well as the Bluetooth from our phones. And it was a really great option. We love having that option to control the lights just from that panel. For some cheaper options, if you're not adding any lights, you really don't need the Garmin Power Switch, so you can omit this. Or rather than the fancy controller, you could simply wire in some relays for the lights controlled by switches. And also, Amazon has some less expensive switch panels that are around $200. Our exterior storage consisted of the rear door platform from Flatline Vanco and the Backwoods Adventure Mods box. and we spent $2,569.65 on this storage option. Some cheaper alternatives to this exterior storage would be potentially a roof box rather than a rear-mounted box, as those run about $500. You could also opt for a smaller sized rear-mounted box that are closer to $2,200, or you could just opt out of an exterior storage box altogether. And another thing that could be absolutely DIY'd, and we did DIY in our Sprinter van, was window covers. For our transit van, we purchased the Van Essentials window covers, and I am super happy with those. We spent $498.57 for the front windows, the back windows, and the windshield covers, and we just love the fact that they are so well made and they fold up so nicely for storage, and we didn't have to make them. And that is everything that we put into the van. And if you were calculating it up, I hope you get the same number that I did, which was $59,099.74. Now, then we also need to add in the cost of the van itself and our 2021 Ford Transit before the conversion with taxes, fees, registration, all of that, was $65,759.98. So in total, we spent $124,859.72 on this entire conversion, which really that sounds like a lot of money, but when you compare it to, say, a Storyteller Overland outfitted van that costs about $220,000, we saved $100,000. Now remember that this doesn't include any of the labor for ourselves doing this conversion, as that's the point in DIYing it, is that you know the quality, you know what went into it, and also you save that labor because you're doing it yourself. I hope that this breakdown of our expenses gives you a really good picture of what to expect when you are working on your own camper van project. And just remember that all of these costs can vary depending on your own choices and preferences, and careful planning and budgeting are really key to a successful camper van conversion. This is a wrap on our 2021 Ford Transit conversion that we have spent the last nearly 2 years building out. Thank you guys all for sticking around for this entire build, and we will see you next time.